So a very good morning to everybody, and a huge welcome back to the Export Recovery Panel. Our series of webinars by New Zealand's exporters for New Zealand's exporters, as together we pave a way towards greater prosperity for our businesses and our communities, for ourselves, and of course for our country too. Our guest today needs very, very little introduction. She is probably the most influential science leader that we have in the country at the present moment. She's an ex-senior lecturer in the University of Auckland. She's the founder, of course, of Nanogirl Labs. She's a best-selling author. She's a personality. She's a public speaker. She's a member of New Zealand Order of Merit. Need I go on? A huge welcome to Michelle Dickinson.
Thank you very much. There's a very long list. I don't usually get that. Just Michelle is usually fine.
It's like, yeah, we can go back and just do Michelle. It's like that long list. It's like, I love it when people don't need introduction. It's because like, you've done so much. We've had an amazing time through lockdown playing with your kitchen science cookbook. You're famous for bringing science back to the kitchen table, but I just want to say up front that you created chaos in our kitchen table here.
I love it. That's my dream.
The mess was gargantuan. How have you been through this whole process? How have the last few months been for you?
So we've been like most other companies, we've been up and down and just trying to stay afloat. So we are still just trying to stay afloat and pivoting pretty much every week right now as the economy is shifting from New Zealand is a very different economy right now to the UK and the US. There's a lot going on over there. So we are trying to figure out where each of the countries in the world is and how do we make sure products fit for all of those countries.
So this must have been quite a radical change for you, actually. Like many other service businesses, all of a sudden your ability to be that personality, that leader out front, was just shut down overnight. So what did it feel like to have to work through that?
Yeah, so we made a decision. We've been working really hard with our live theatre performance shows. We're the only show in the world that does science pantomime, basically, and people love it. And globally, we got lots of people interested. So this year, 2020, was our world domination tour. We were about to go on the road for 6 months. We were going to do a month of Australia touring live theatres, 6 weeks in the Middle East, 2 months in the UK, ending a full month at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. It was pretty much all of our income for the year. We had a whole team set up to go, and then COVID came and everybody cancelled, and we lost pretty much 100% of our income in about 24 hours. So yeah, it was a good day.
Yeah. So what advice did you give yourself then to be able to get through that day when you go to zero revenue? It's like, what is it that you said to yourself you think that got you through?
Look, it was obviously a challenging day where I saw all the cancellations coming, and I look over the monitors to all of my staff, and I know my staff's kids' names, like their family. We're a really close-knit group here, and I thought, right, everything I make a decision on today is going to affect not only these people in front of me, but their whole families. And we need to think really clearly and think about what the right decision is. This happened 3 days before lockdown was due to come in. So I also knew that we were going to have to really do something quick if we were going to do anything, and that live events were just not going to be on our agenda this year. So we had to go, okay, what is it that we do? What is our value proposition? What do we do without live events? And actually, what does the world need right now? What is the world going to need during lockdown? For me as a tech savvy person, it wasn't a problem because I know how to use these things, but actually for a lot of people, this would be the first time that they would have to rely on technology so much. So I thought about what is the shift that people are going to be looking for? And we decided to pivot pretty much within 8 hours. We got all the stuff to buy into our crazy idea and said, okay, we're going to build an online digital platform for educating your kids at home while they're in lockdown, and we're going to release it in 3 days. So that's what we did.
So 3 days later, it was ready to go.
3 days later, it was ready to go. So we stayed up all night, we coded, and I really love it. So my husband is also my co-founder, and we're both nerds. And so we actually used to code, and we're like, okay, let's take our coding skills. They're pretty basic, but we can at least build a wireframe of what we need. Then we called in some friends who were like, hey, do you want to stay up all night with us like the old days and code? And so a bunch of our friends came in. Our production team, who was supposed to be on the road with us, we said, okay, we're going to need to build a studio. I don't know what goes in a studio, but we're going to build one. And so they sourced a whole bunch of props and set up a studio for us upstairs. We just said, okay, we're just going to throw everything at it that we've got and hope that we can start a new business in 3 days that has our core values of education, but actually says what is the need that people need during lockdown.
Yeah, and this is such a good lesson. This is about listening to the market and giving them what they want for right now, not what you think, but what they want. What's the response been to this new way of engaging with the audience on this new platform?
Look, during lockdown, we ended up spreading our global reach more than we ever thought we would. We're now in 107 countries around the world, and that happened within about 2 weeks of us launching the product. The product was never perfect, and we knew that, and we said to all of our customers, hey, we built this in 3 days. We want this to work for you. It's not going to be perfect. Please forgive us, and please tell us what you're finding. And so when you're open about just trying to survive and do good, actually customers are really forgiving, and they helped us to fix some of the bugs in there. And yeah, it was really overwhelming. So what we decided to do is launch one lesson every single day for the whole of lockdown, so 50 lessons, only using lockdown materials, cards, sitter, tape, where your child would build a superpower. We have 10 different superpowers. Wow. And it was very structured. And then there was a parent cheat sheet. So parents who are trying to juggle working from home and looking after their children wouldn't have to co-watch with their children. It was an independent task for their children. But then when their children came back to them, the parent had a cheat sheet to be like, let me ask you a question, and I know the answer to this. So actually pitching it, although it looks like a child education product, we were actually pitching it as a parent help product to help you feel reassured that your children were still learning, but also that you didn't have to go through this with them.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, it's that understanding of the emotional drivers behind the parents that makes the platform successful as well.
And children don't buy, parents buy. So actually your unique selling point has to be something that a parent goes, I need this, plus it's good for my children. So that's what we did.
So what's if there's one unusual thing that you've taken away from this whole experience of having to just go, you know what, 3 days we're live, it's happening. It's like, what's the biggest learning that you've taken out of this for you personally leading the business?
Yeah, I think the biggest learning is that we can do stuff that we've never done before and actually pull it off. So one of the things we did is build a TV studio upstairs, and then my husband and I camped in the office for the whole of lockdown. And so that we could make content. And that meant that every news channel that wanted something, we had TV quality cameras and Wi-Fi to be able to, I could live stream about COVID all over the world, but actually we were able to be commissioned and make a whole 12 episode, 30-minute homeschooling channel TV science show for the Ministry of Education and TVNZ. And we filmed and wrote it all upstairs in this studio that we've never built before and don't even know how to turn the cameras on for. And had an editing team that partnered with us, and it was all done remotely, and had a director in on Zoom who could help us get the right shots. And we produced literally 2 seasons of this amazing show that I've always wanted to make, and nobody ever said that we could. Suddenly when people are desperate, if you have the tools and you believe that you can, we're able to make things that we would never have been able to make before.
Isn't it interesting though? It's like you have to give yourself permission. It's that nobody ever said we could, and then all of a sudden when you need to, you can just do it. It's like that need for permission often holds us back in what we do and what we develop in our business. And
totally.
And certainly it's like what would love to be able to bring in this conversation today is actually how pertinent, how relevant that sort of thinking is, that self-belief, and that's that natural resilience and innovation in the way that we all have to change our businesses, because everything is like you're currently the champion of R&D and innovation in this country. It's like it's the place where you found, and your belief that New Zealand should be a global R&D leader, and that for every young Kiwi business that this has to be at the heart of them. Like from your perspective now, having gone through this change yourself, having experienced yourself, and now looking at it about how the country's responding, are we well enough prepared really as a country, as a business community, to take R&D, that sense of innovation, and put it at the heart of our value creation moving forward?
Yeah, great question. So I think one of the things as humans we naturally do when things are outside of our comfort zone is to want to go back to our comfort zone. And so what I'm seeing is a shift towards what we used to do and going back to the way we used to be. And I'm not convinced that that is the best idea. I think New Zealand has some incredible researchers. We do it on basically the smell of an oily rag. If you look at our investment into R&D in New Zealand compared to some other countries, it's tiny, but we do some incredible things. I think the weak spot that we have here is understanding and having the right people around the table for commercialization. And so if you look at who's done it well, Soul Machines is a great example. So taking, Professor Mark Sager and Greg Cross, you have a research academic and a commercialization brain who come together. I mean, they've raised tens of millions of dollars, but it took that partnership. And what I'd love to see is more of that business savvy commercialization person who understands the tech transfer process, and your nerdy academic who just loves the science. And actually, there's always going to be some butting of heads there, because the purist and the researcher always wants it to be the purist. But to take it to market, I actually think it's a skill set that we're really lacking in New Zealand.
We're not set up to bring those worlds together. They're actually like, this is from our perspective, just inside the business community. Business is business. It's like business people doing business. That's research and academia, and there are bridges between the two, but we're not connected. We're not talking enough. What is it that we're missing here in our ability to communicate and to bring these worlds together?
I actually think it's diversity in both places. So it was very clear to me when I worked at the University of Auckland, there was a distinct lack of diversity of people who I worked with who had commercialization experience. Many academics have a easy track, which is you do your PhD, you do a postdoc, you become a lecturer, you stay in the system, and actually have very little hands-on commercialization, financial budgeting, running big teams experience. And the opposite is true. So I think in business, they have no idea the pressures of what an academic has to do, not just in their research, but all of the other bureaucratic processes and teaching that takes their time. So universities can seem to take a long time to get anything done, because it's actually only a small % of their FTE that they're focused on it. Yeah. And I think the lack of understanding for how both system works actually means that there have been lots of negative experiences between the two, because of the lack of speed and pace and the lack of understanding of what the outputs need to be for commercialization.
Yeah, so where does, it's like, we're looking at R&D as being a way of driving value for the country, and at a super high level here. And where's the starting point? Does that future value come from the world of science, or does it come from the world of business people? When you've got your business hat on during the last few months, you've listened to the market, you've given the market what they wanted. When you've got your academics hat on, then you're thinking about the science and how that progresses. Both important. We have a chicken and egg situation here. Which is your predominant hat here for creating value for New Zealand?
So look, I think we need both. The great thing about what we call blue skies research in academia, which is basically scientists just nerding out the things they love, is you never know how the thing they might find might help solve a problem. Right. And so there's lots of things that have been invented by accident. And so we do need that blue skies research. What I don't think we're doing is collaboration between different faculties, different departments, different divisions. I know that as an engineer, I went to the hospital and I saw a challenge that they had in the hospital around biofouling, which is where tubes that were going into patients were getting clogged up. And I was like, oh, that's just a piping issue, because I'm an engineer. and the medics were like, what do you mean? It's always blocked. Like, that's just the way they come. And so without those conversations of actually seeing how what you might be able to solve fits into somebody else's problem, I think we actually need more collaboration and connectiveness around all of those different divisions. That's academia and industry. So you can figure out what the problems actually are.
So practically speaking, how do we start to build that collaboration from it? Because everybody's facing the same challenges that you face as business leaders, going, I've got markets that might be broken. I've got, like consumer behavior that's changed. The world is changing faster than we can keep up. We don't have a lot of time on our hands. It's like how do we take practical steps to actually make some of this magic happen? Because it's like if we don't do it ourselves, it won't happen. People won't give it to us. We have to make a change from both sides. What do you recommend is the best way that we approach this?
Okay. I mean, people aren't going to like this answer because, opinions about this. But some models that I've seen work really well. So Israel is an example of how their tech transfer system in their universities works incredibly well. And the way that it works is that they value the IP that the academic comes out with and gives them a financial reward and ownership of that IP. So a researcher is actually incentivized to take their idea through to commercialization and sale financially. And some people, I think, are really driven financially. And if you can see that your idea has the potential to make millions of dollars for you, I think there may be some drivers in there that push some types of people. And I think it's really hard when you're an academic or trying to balance everything to really see where your value is, because your salary is your salary. And so there are some systems out there with different universities, and Israel is one of the models which incentivize researchers to say, hey, if you focus on this in your spare time and it goes big, this could pay your mortgage for the rest of your life. So I'm not saying it's the only solution, but I do think maybe making sure that we can incentivize different models to help people focus, and also taking away an academic's other burdens, perhaps, so that they can spend a chunk of their time on a project with industry versus trying to still balance everything out.
Yeah, and those industry and academia and science models, they sound terrifying. They sound like they take, this coming from a business person, it sounds like it takes too long, it's too complicated. In fact, the whole R&D world just seems like, I need solutions now. I don't have time to wait. Are we confusing R&D and innovation in our thinking here? Is there a simpler way that we can break it down so we know how to progress things?
Yeah, so I think R&D for me is very much a core research, looking for something new, trying to find the next big thing. Innovation for me is just a tweak. So I think of what we did with our business. We went from live events to digital platform. The content was very similar. We just innovated the way that we delivered that content. And so for me, innovation can be very quick. It's seeing something that isn't perfect or needs a tweak and just actually need some smart brains around it to go, have you thought about it this way? Or my solution could help you with that. I think R&D is a much more of a long-term, bigger picture. You know, we've got challenges around renewable energy and climate change and those big things, which I think we also do really well. But I don't see much focus on innovation as in just brainstorming, bringing your business in or your problem and actually having some smart, diverse heads around the room just going, actually, we've solved that over here. We could probably just jerry-rig this on for you until you decide if it's the thing that you want to go forward with.
I guess that's a little bit like your story about the pipe. It's like an engineer saw that and went, you know what, you got a block in your pipe. You want to sort that out. And this is a human thing that's easy to do and easy to bring people together. It's like is our attitude changing when it comes to collaboration in that way to create shared value? Do you think our attitude as a country is changing through COVID? Is there something optimistic that we can hang on to in the way that we're behaving that you've noticed?
Yeah, look, I think it's very regional, right? I think New Zealand still, sadly, is based on who you know, not necessarily what you know. And so a lot of these connections are happenstance. You happen to know a friend of a friend who is doing that thing. If you look at, so David Daz and I wrote a book about innovation called Number 8 Recharge. And if you look at some of those examples, it was, the problem became because friends from around the table said, I think I can help you build this in your shed. And actually it wasn't about networking bigger than that. So I think we can be really regional sometimes in that. I live in Auckland and I know that I'm in a very luxurious bubble of smart people and lots of universities. And so being able to tap in on that, I think if I lived somewhere, like Gisborne, it might be more challenging to do that. So I think New Zealand is quite regional in its problem solving and its connection. And I think we tend to be quite insular.
Yeah. So we've been talking about the team of 5 million all the way through this crisis. There is something to be said for reaching out beyond our own bubble and doing this, but this is going to take some incentive or some further change for us to do this. Do you think it's conceptually incredibly simple, but practically quite hard to do? What incentive does business need, do you think, to reach out beyond your immediate network to go, you know what, we need more brains, more perspective to create more value for more people? What's the incentive we've got to bring into the business thinking to make this happen?
Do you know what? I don't think it's an incentive. I think business always wants to do that. I think what we need to do is break down the walls and the silos and actually understand how different institutions work, what those timelines are, and how to interact with them. I think it's very challenging to engage with the university. You don't know who to go to. The systems are different for every faculty. The relationships tend to be a long time. You've got somebody running a big, long contract, and sometimes you just want to sit around and have a coffee and just be like, show us what you do, and we'll show you ours, and we'll see if those fit. So I think actually taking away some of the formal side of it and bringing people together is really good. If you look at what happened during lockdown, and a crisis is a great way for everybody just to pull together a team of 5 million. During lockdown, something was created called Monarchy, which was a business solution online platform, right? If your business was struggling, you would go, hey, we're stuffed. This is what our business does. Any ideas? And business mentors from around New Zealand, some of the top caliber people, volunteered their time and said, hey, seen this before, have you thought about doing that? And I would love to see something like Monarchy at a bigger scale, not in a crisis, but actually as an innovation online hub where people can just see, and you might key tag, if my specialty is nanotech, if people wanted a nanotech solution, I might be tagged in to see if I can come up with some ideas or some connections. But I don't think it's a big thing that we would have to do, and I think it would be online.
But it's a big thing for our minds, though. This is a reset piece. We're humans. We're in our I'm doing my thing. What are you doing today? My thing is this. This feels like a new New Zealand. It feels like a new way of working, a new way of sharing our value and sharing our talents geographically and practically as well. This is something which I think, from a personal point of view, that we have to grasp. We have to be ready to work in new ways. Do you think, as a country, that we have the right attitudes to be able to reset the economy through here, as opposed to grasping to try to find the things that are familiar for us to go back towards? Are we ready for this as business people and academics?
Change is hard. Change is really hard, and people don't like change very much. People don't like not being in their comfort zone. So I think changing a mindset and mentality is always going to be driven by the economy. And I think that businesses that will succeed will be those who are able to innovate and pivot, and those who don't, sadly, are those who are still, trying to figure out how to keep their old system running. And so I just think we're going to probably go through a horrible churn period. And maybe Christmas time we'll sort of see who's survived and who hasn't, and what the economy is. With our borders being closed, everybody's had to change things. We can't now get specialists in to fix machinery, for example, or bring in some of the systems that we used to. So we're having to call on our neighbours more than we ever have. I hope that's a good thing. I hope we're going to recognise that we actually manufacture and build some beautiful things here and have some expert talent. But I think we're going to go through a bit of a horrible phase, especially after the wage subsidy sort of runs out, where those who survive, and we get to reflect and take a look at why they survived, and those who tried to stay the same. I'm not convinced that that's the way you're going to make it through.
No, this is going to be, we need that path to new value, however we can do that. It's like, do you think that we have do you think we have the right tools and the right culture of innovation naturally in the way that we do things already to be able to keep building value? Or are we actually facing a bit of a lag between the old world and the new world that we've just got to muddle through before we can really get back on track?
Yeah. Oh, so we saw during lockdown that people are more open to video conferencing now, right? It became the norm, and 30 days makes a habit. And so you sort of go, people are getting used to being able to have meetings and figure out how they work so that everybody's included. I think that mental shift was a significant shift for the world. I think our ability to do that made us think about how do we build global teams perhaps without needing to visit those places. So I think that was a good mental shift, but it's baby steps. And I think we're going to need little more baby steps around introducing a new type of technology or a new way of thinking. Look, I think so many of my friends have been laid off, so many executives and amazing people. And I think their reflections on their time in corporate and actually how they don't have a purpose anymore will be it's going to be a groundswell of those people now looking to create value themselves. And I'm seeing a lot of them start up consultancies and startups. I think that bubble, as it gets bigger, will hopefully be a bubble that can really shift as business moves in a totally new way. Again, through desperation, through people losing their jobs, but being very focused then on what is their purpose and what is their value. So I think we've got a while to go, but I'm optimistic. I'm always optimistic. Optimistic change coming.
It's an interesting thought, though. What you're seeing here is a knowledge bubble, if nothing else. That's what it is. It's expertise and perspective. It's exactly what we've been saying in the last 15 minutes that we need. If this knowledge bubble enables us to connect places that aren't connected geographically or by speciality, then perhaps there is a reason to be optimistic in here. But you've been driving this change for ages. Your number 8 Wire Recharge book was what, 2018? That's, according to my calendar, that's 2 years ago.
We've been trying to, but yeah, people tend not to listen when there's no crisis because they think, but we're doing well, we don't need that advice. So it's
like, you've been driving this idea about new value and R&D now for a while. I mean, plainly, this is what drives you as a thought leader in the country. But it's like, what lessons can we take out, like, from what you saw back in 2018, and what are we still missing the boat with? What should we be doing more of?
Do you know what? Since 2018, I haven't seen anything change significantly. If I look at the examples in that book and I look at where those organizations are, the ones that we predicted would do well have done really well. And the ones we were like, have probably fallen by the wayside for the same reasons. One of the biggest things that we see in New Zealand is when people set up businesses, they set it up seeing that they can solve a problem locally, and then they'll eventually scale it, and then they'll go global. And they'll probably go to Australia, maybe they'll go to another English-speaking country. And actually, when I look at how other countries, and Israel I bring up again because it's got some of its similar challenges to New Zealand and some very different ones, one of the things that they do is they always, with a startup, build global first. Say, which country are we going to sell to? Because we know locals will buy. Kiwis will buy. If you say made in New Zealand and you're proud of that, you don't need to market as much to New Zealand than you do in a new market. So one of the things we did with our online platform is immediately on day one, I said, we're going to sell this directly to England and America. We're going to make sure it aligns with their curriculum. We know New Zealanders will buy. They love our brand. They know it's aligned to the New Zealand curriculum. We don't have to advertise any of that. But if we want to get into new markets, we have to make sure our infrastructure is set up for those markets first around currency and language. And I think that was one of our biggest success stories, is that by building for global first, we sold lots to New Zealanders, but we entered new markets because we thought about that. And I'd love to see more New Zealanders, before they finish their business plan, go, if we were to export this, what is the country we would focus on? What is our strategy for that before we've built anything? And then how do we make sure that's always part of our plan?
So this is actually an international first, an export first way of thinking. Is actually turning everything around 180 degrees inside our minds and going, when we're building a business, we're building it for the market that's beyond our shores.
Yeah.
This is quite radical. We're a country that tests things and makes sure things okay, and then goes to one place and to another place. This is a narrative of unashamed ambition. It's the opposite of tall poppy. It's like, do you think we have a confidence problem in this country, or are we just not being told to be big right from the start?
I think it's an experience challenge. I don't think people understand markets. So I've been part of a lot of different groups going to, taking small businesses to LA, taking small businesses to China and to Israel. And what became very clear to me is people here thought, oh, LA is the same as New Zealand, they speak the same language, I'll just sell it there and do some Facebook ads. But actually, when they got to meet the people and understand the business and how people purchase there, they were like, oh, it would never work if we tried to do this from New Zealand to here. And so I think part of it is that assumption that we know what Australia will buy, but there are so many failed New Zealand stories. My food bag is a great example of when they tried to go to Australia and it didn't work, because there were lots of challenges in Australia that we don't have in New Zealand. And so they have some great stories around what not to do when it comes to export. So I think part of it is an assumption that we know what offshore purchasers will actually, how they will consume, versus doing some groundwork or having people on the ground who can help you with that data at the beginning.
Yeah, it's just, capabilities, everything here. It's an interesting, when you're thinking about going global first, it's an interesting challenge, but I can hear the voices in the back of my head going, but we're on the bottom of the Pacific, we're a long way from everywhere. How on earth can you go global first? Practically, especially through COVID. Is our geographical location, which is a benefit right now, actually going to become a handbrake if we try to apply this at scale?
Look, there are different markets, but if you're in SaaS, software as a service, it doesn't matter where you are. I mean, we've got some of the best developers in New Zealand who can build stuff here at half the price of what they would expect in the US and make beautiful product and get to live in New Zealand. And software as a service, you can buy anywhere. You just tap your finger on your thumb. So, when it comes to physical exports, I think those are some, bigger challenges around that. But I think if you're in software or in digital, or you're moving towards that because you have to now because of lockdown, I think it doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah, I mean, you've been on trade missions and everything else around the world. Are there interesting analogies with how other countries are tackling this that we should be aware of? You mentioned Israel before as being a country that's of a similar size with similar restrictions to how they operate, and driven with a very, very big science agenda.
Sure. And Singapore is very similar. So if you look at Singapore, very similar population to us, very tiny landmass, but always thinking about exports first. And I think it's that mindset. It's that whole, before you do your business plan, who is your biggest market? And it's probably not New Zealand. We're a tiny, tiny market who don't consume very much. If you look at the state of California and the population there, it's a big market if you can figure out how to get into it. And so, people say, oh, I'm going to go to America. And I'm like, oh, you might want to narrow it down to a city before you think about the whole of America, because it's very different. And so that naivety around some of those conversations I have, I think, sadly with COVID, you can't just go on the ground and sort of walk around and see what it's like, but you can definitely connect through online means now to have experts in your territories to actually represent you and tell you what's going on there.
Again, it's like this broadening the mind base. It's interesting. You mentioned naivety, and naivety seems to be critical in solving problems. It's, you know, that pipe is it's blocked, so that's what you got to do. It's the naivety of innovation that we need, but not the naivety of commercialization. Is that be fair to say that we've got to get the balance right? So how do we inspire the rest of the world to connect with us? Because right now, it's easy for us to sit here in Auckland on a Wednesday morning to go, just put something around, it'll be fine. It's a big world out there, and we have to persuade people to back us because we are extraordinary. What is it about our reputation right now, do you think, that supports us in that, in the impression that New Zealand is an amazing force to work with?
Yeah, so look, I think we're in a really privileged position, and we almost have a big advert up to the world saying, hey, New Zealand is amazing, look at us. Yeah. You know, we're walking around without masks, we have freedom, we have so many privileges here. What that means, though, is our industry is working. And so if any time to get people to do business in New Zealand, it is now, because they don't have to worry about COVID right now. You know that we can make movies, we can, you know, have manufacturing plants open. A lot of the things that the rest of the world are struggling with, we have. And what we have to do is make sure with that New Zealand flag and billboard that is shining to the world right now is we let people know where we are and what we do. Really simple web presence. I mean, a lot of New Zealand companies don't have a great web presence, and that's probably how many people are going to find you. Understanding SEO, if you don't know what SEO is, find an expert, so that when people are looking online for your services, you come up at the top of the Google search. They're tiny technical things, but they can really make the difference to make you, in a global world, appear at the top of people's lists versus at the bottom. Nobody wants to be on page 2 of Google. And so I think those are some really simple things that we can do. I think having conversations, if you aren't talking about your business, you know, one of the things that I do, and people are probably sick of hearing from me, but I write opinion pieces, I talk about what we're doing, I tell you about the good bits and the bad bits. But I feel like if you come on the journey with me, you'll have more understanding of the core values of our business, and hopefully you'll do business with us in the future, or you might recommend us. And I think if you don't take people on the stories and the journeys of your business, they don't know who you are. Nobody's going to come looking for you. And so a little bit about communication and presence, I think, is also something we need to work on. We're not very good as Kiwis about talking about ourselves.
No, we're not. It's actually been a theme in the past few weeks across the interviews, the idea of storytelling being so critical to your people understanding your customer experience and the value in your products. But it's not a natural Kiwi trait. But what if you flip that around, then actually what I mean, it's like you're from, like me, from the other side of the world. Looking and living and loving this country, what is it about the way we think and the way we do things in New Zealand that you think is particularly valuable at this time as we rebuild from COVID?
Kiwis are definitely outside of the box thinkers. Like I work in a lot of Asian countries where, you know, it's all about rote learning, do exactly what you were told and just do it, don't question it. I think New Zealand's are really good at going, why are we doing it this way? I know Bob, and Bob could do it the other way. I think we should do it Bob's way. And I love that about here, and I don't really see that anywhere else. We have that freedom of thinking and that ability to just try some stuff that I think means that innovation here in New Zealand is incredible. What I'd love to see now is when we've tried that stuff, having the expertise to be able to take that stuff to the world. And I think that's sort of what we hopefully could work on next.
Yeah, we are a very badly behaved country, and it's one of the loveliest things about being here. Everybody's got a different way of doing things. So if you could like implore the audience and the wider business community who's watching this to try 3 things this week that they haven't done, that helps to build those bridges, that helps us to become more innovative, to help support those links with R&D, what are those 3 things that you'd like to see us do?
Super simple. Number 1, have a coffee with somebody that you've never had a coffee before, somebody who's really different to you, and just chat about what you do. I mean, you know, you tend to hang out with the same people, doing the same thing, having the same conversations, and they tend to be like you because that's why you like having coffee with them. So that diversity of thought, I think, is really important, and actually force some of those diverse conversations to happen, because you never know where the spark plug might go off for somebody. That's number 1. Number 2, digital presence is probably the core to survival right now. So if you don't understand how people are finding you through digital platforms, through Google, if you don't understand SEO and SEM, find somebody who does. It could really help your business to thrive in an economy where people are looking online. And number 3, be really proud of being a Kiwi. Like, we've done really well. We actually do so many things really well. Keep doing it. I'm really proud to be a Kiwi, and I think we're going to be okay.
think we will. Michelle, it's been an absolute joy talking to you today. It's like, I'm going to go out now, find someone in the streets and go for coffee, and hopefully not get arrested in doing that. We're going to take all of this on board. Do keep us up to date with how you're going with Nanogirl Labs as you go right around the world with that. It's just so exciting to hear you turning things upside down in 3 days. It's like anything's possible. It's what we do in this country, and it's lovely to hear you pivoting the business so successfully through that. Keep us up to date, keep us inspired, keep on being the champion for building bridges. We have to be reminded to do things differently in this community, but for right now, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting. Thank you so much for all your time, and all the best for the next few weeks. You take care.
Thank you for having me.